The bus stop was almost empty when he noticed her. A little girl sat alone on the cold metal bench, feet not touching the ground, hands folded tightly in her lap as if she were holding something fragile that no one else could see. Her eyes were open, but they didn't follow the passing cars. They didn't flinch at the sudden hiss of a stopping bus or the sharp voices of commuters arguing about fares. They stared forward still, unfocused, silent, as a single father. He was used to scanning rooms for small details most people ignored. A forgotten backpack, a loose shoelace, a child standing too close to the curb. Instinct had trained him well, and every instinct in his body told him something was wrong. He watched as one bus arrived, then another. Doors opened. People climbed on. Engines roared away. The girl didn't move. No adult stood nearby. No one called her name. No hand reached for her shoulder. He glanced at his watch. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, he stepped closer. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently. "Are you waiting for someone?" She didn't answer. That was when he realized her eyes weren't just distant, they were blind. His chest tightened. He crouched in front of her, lowering his voice the way he used to with his own daughter when she was scared of the dark. "Do you know where your parents are?" Her lips trembled. She shook her head once, slowly. What she said next, spoken so quietly it almost vanished into the noise of traffic, made his stomach drop. "They told me to sit here. They said they'd come back." And in that moment, standing at a forgotten bus stop with a blind child, no one seemed to notice. The single dad understood something that stunned him to the core. This wasn't an accident. She hadn't been lost. She had been left. The bus stop sat at the edge of the service road, far enough from the city center that people only waited there if they had no other choice. The bench was scratched, the shelter roof cracked, and the wind carried dust instead of comfort. It was the kind of place where everyone kept their head down, eyes on their phones, minds already somewhere else. He had finished his shift early that evening. Construction work paid the bills, but it didn't leave room for mistakes, especially not when you were raising a child alone. His daughter was at home with a neighbor, homework spread across the kitchen table, waiting for him to return so she could show him the spelling test she'd practiced all week. He thought about that as he slowed near the bus stop, checking the time, calculating how long he could spare. That was when he saw the girl. She looked too small to be there by herself. Maybe 7, maybe 8. Her shoes were worn thin at the toes, her jacket zipped all the way up, even though it wasn't that cold. Her hands rested neatly on her knees, fingers interlaced, unmoving. She wasn't fidgeting. She wasn't swinging her legs. She wasn't watching the road. She was waiting at first. He assumed her parent was nearby, maybe inside the shelter, maybe standing just out of sight. He turned his head slightly, scanning the area. No adult matched her. No one watched her with protective impatience. No one called out her name. A bus pulled in with a sigh of brakes. People stepped on, shoulders hunched, eyes tired. The driver glanced at the girl, hesitated for half a second, then closed the doors and pulled away. The girl didn't react. That was the moment. Unease settled in his chest. He told himself not to jump to conclusions. Cities were full of odd moments that explained themselves if you waited long enough. Still, he stayed where he was, pretending to check messages while keeping her in the corner of his vision. Another bus arrived, then another. Time passed in small, uncomfortable increments. The girl remained perfectly still. Finally, he walked closer. He didn't want to scare her. He knew how loud grown-ups could seem when you were small. He crouched a few steps away, careful not to invade her space. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you okay?" No response. He tried again, gentler. "Miss." She turned her head toward the sound of his voice, but her eyes didn't focus. They drifted past him, unanchored. That's when understanding hit him, sudden and heavy. She was blind. His throat tightened. He moved a little closer so she could hear him clearly. "I'm right here," he said. "You're not in trouble. I just want to help." Her shoulders relaxed just a fraction, as if she'd been holding herself rigid for a long time. "Are you a busman?" she asked. "No," he replied. I'm just someone waiting too, she nodded slowly. Okay? He glanced around again. Still no one. Who are you waiting for? He asked. My mom, she said, and my uncle. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like words repeated until they lost their meaning. And how long have you been here? He asked. She tilted her head, thinking, I don't know. It was bright when we came. It wasn't bright now. A familiar ache spread through his chest, the same ache he'd felt years ago when his wife died. And the world kept moving as if nothing had happened. The same ache that came from realizing a child was alone when they shouldn't be. Did they tell you when they'd be back? He asked carefully. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened together. They said to sit. They said not to move. They said they'd come back after they fixed something. His jaw clenched. He knew that line. He'd heard it before, not from his own life, but from stories that ended badly. He stood slowly, anger and resolve rising together. Whatever the truth was, it wasn't simple, and it wasn't safe. Looking down at the blind girl waiting faithfully at a broken bus stop, he made a decision without fully realizing it yet. He wasn't walking away. He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could sense someone was there, but not so close that it felt like a trap. The metal was cold through his work pants. He ignored it. My name's Daniel, he said. What's yours? There was a pause. Long enough to make him worry he'd pushed too far. Lena, she said finally. That's a nice name, he replied. How old are you, Lena? 8, she said. Then, as if correcting herself, almost 9. In the summer, he nodded, though she couldn't see it. Do you know your mom's phone number? Her shoulders stiffened again. She said not to talk to strangers. It was good advice, he said calmly. But sometimes strangers are just people who haven't met yet. I'm not asking you to go anywhere. I just want to make sure you're safe. She lowered her head. She didn't give me a phone. That answer hit harder than he expected. He took a breath, choosing his next words carefully. Lena, do you know where you live? The street. A building. Anything you remember? She shook her head. I can't read signs, she said quietly, as if apologizing for it. Of course you can't, he thought, and someone knew that. The realization made his stomach turn. This hadn't been carelessness. This had been calculated. He stood and waved down the next bus driver as the vehicle slowed. Hey, he called out. Have you seen anyone asking about a little girl? Blind, about 8 years old? The driver frowned, glanced at Lena, then shook his head. She'd been here a while? Too long. The doors closed again. The bus pulled away. Daniel looked down at her. Lena, can I ask you something important? She nodded. When you and your mom came here, did anything happen before that? Did anyone argue? Her lips pressed together. He could see her weighing something inside herself. They were mad, she said softly. Not at me. At money. That word lingered between them. My uncle said I was too expensive, she added. The way children repeat adult words without fully understanding them, he said, doctors cost too much. And schools? And time. Daniel felt heat rise behind his eyes. He swallowed it back. What did your mom say? He asked. She cried, Lena replied. She kept saying she'd come back. She told me to be brave. She said if I stayed very still, nothing bad would happen. Daniel clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles ached. He looked around the bus stop again, the cracked pavement, the flickering streetlight, the indifferent traffic. Anyone could have taken her. Anyone could have hurt her. And the worst part was that she'd been taught to wait quietly through all of it. You've been very brave, he said, his voice steady, despite the storm inside him. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. She tilted her head toward him. Are you leaving too? No, he said immediately. I'm staying. Her shoulders sagged in relief, just a little. He pulled out his phone and stepped a few feet away, calling the non-emergency number first, then the local child services line when that led nowhere. Each ring felt longer than the last. He explained the situation slowly, clearly, repeating himself when asked. Yes. Blind. Alone. Yes. I'm with her now. No. No guardian present. When he hung up, he returned to the bench. They're sending someone, he told her. People whose job is to help kids. Will they make me go back? She asked. He hesitated. Honesty mattered, but so did gentleness. They'll ask questions, and they'll try to find your mom. But they won't leave you alone again. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, Do you have kids? I do, he said. A daughter. She's 9. Lena smiled faintly. Then you know, she said. He did. And that knowledge settled into him with a weight he couldn't shake. As the distant wail of approaching sirens cut through the evening air, Daniel understood something with painful clarity. Whatever happened next. This moment at the bus stop had already changed both of their lives. The sirens grew louder, then softened as a white van pulled up across the street. It wasn't police child services, just as he'd been told. 2 people stepped out, a woman in her late 40s with a clipboard tucked under her arm, and a younger man carrying a small backpack. They moved carefully, the way people do when they don't want to frighten a child. Daniel stood first. I'm the one who called, he said quietly. The woman nodded. Thank you for staying. She crouched in front of Lena, lowering herself until her voice came from eye level. Hi, Lena. My name's Karen. I'm here to help you, okay? Lena's fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. She didn't answer. Daniel felt her fear before she spoke it. He leaned slightly toward her. I'm still here, he said. Just like I promised. That seemed to matter. Lena took a breath. Okay, she whispered. Karen asked gentle questions, how long she'd been there, what she remembered, whether she was hurt. Lena answered slowly, carefully, as if afraid the wrong answer might make everything disappear. When Karen asked about her mother, Lena's voice wavered but didn't break. She repeated the same words she'd told Daniel, almost exactly, like a line she'd practiced to survive. The younger man handed Lena a juice box and explained what it was before placing it in her hands. She felt for the straw, smiled faintly when she found it, took a cautious sip. Daniel watched all of it, an unexpected tension tightening his chest. This was the part where he was supposed to step back. He knew that. He wasn't family. He wasn't official. He was just someone who'd noticed Karen stood and pulled Daniel aside. We'll need a statement, she said. And your contact information? Of course, he replied. She studied him for a moment. You didn't have to stay. A lot of people wouldn't. He glanced back at Lena. I know. As he spoke with them, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his neighbor. Your daughter's asking when you'll be home. Guilt flared, sharp and immediate. He typed back quickly. Running late. Please tell her, I'll explain. When he looked up again, Lena was standing small, uncertain, holding the juice box with both hands. Are they taking me away? She asked, her voice trembling. Daniel knelt in front of her. They're taking you somewhere safe for tonight, he said. I'll stay until you leave, she swallowed. Will you disappear? The question landed harder than anything else that night. No, he said, and surprised himself by how sure he sounded. You know where to find me now. Karen raised an eyebrow but said nothing. They loaded Lena into the van gently, buckling her in, explaining every step. Before the door closed, she reached out blindly. Daniel took her hand. Thank you, she said. For seeing me. The door shut. The van pulled away. The bus stop felt emptier than before. At home that night, Daniel listened as his daughter talked through dinner school drama. A missing pencil, a joke her friend had told. He nodded, smiled, responded when needed. But his mind kept drifting back to a cracked bench and a blind girl who had been told to wait forever. Later, after his daughter was asleep, his phone rang. This is Karen from Child Services, the voice said. We located Lena's mother. Daniel sat up straight. Is she okay? There was a pause. She's alive, Karen said carefully. But the situation is complicated. There's debt. Medical bills. Pressure from family. Daniel closed his eyes. We believe Lena was left there intentionally, Karen continued. Not to be harmed, but to be unburdened. The word made his stomach twist. Lena asked about you, Karen added. She remembers your name. Daniel stared at the dark ceiling. His heart pounding. In all his years as a single father, he had learned one truth the hard way. Some moments don't ask permission before changing your life. And this one wasn't finished yet. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, listening to the soft rhythm of his daughter's breathing through the half-open bedroom door, staring at the ceiling while his mind replayed everything Karen had said, left intentionally, unburdened. Words chosen to sound professional, but carrying a cruelty he couldn't shake. By morning, he was exhausted but clear. After dropping his daughter at school, he sat in his truck for a long moment, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. He told himself this wasn't his responsibility. He had done what any decent person should do. He had stayed. He had called for help. That should have been the end of it. Yet when his phone buzzed again just before noon, his heart jumped. Daniel, Karen said, I'm calling because Lena keeps asking for you. She won't engage much with the staff. She's polite, but withdrawn. What does that mean? He asked. It means she's waiting again, Karen replied. Only this time, she's waiting for someone she trusts. Daniel exhaled slowly. And her mother? She hasn't come forward, Karen said. And based on what we've learned, she may not. There's pressure from extended family to place Lena into the system permanently. The word landed heavily. Why are you telling me this? Daniel asked. Because Lena mentioned something important, Karen said. She said you have a daughter. Same age. Daniel closed his eyes. That kind of familiarity matters, Karen continued. Especially for a blind child. Stability matters. Voices matter. There it was, the unspoken question hovering just beneath the surface. I'm not. Applying to adopt a child, Daniel said carefully. I know, Karen replied. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if you'd be willing to visit her. Just once. Supervised. Silence filled the cab of his truck. He thought of his work schedule, his bills, his carefully balanced life, held together by routines and discipline. He thought of how long it had taken to rebuild after Lawson, how fragile that balance still was. Then he thought of a small hand reaching out blindly in the dark. When, he asked, that afternoon he found himself in a quiet government building that smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Karen met him at the door and led him down a hallway where sounds echoed too loudly. She knocked softly before opening a room. Lena, she said gently, someone's here to see you. Daniel spoke before he even saw her. Hey, it's me. Her head snapped toward the sound. You came, Lena said. I said I wouldn't disappear, he replied. She smiled full, this time. Don guarded and held her arms out uncertainly. He hesitated only a second before stepping forward and letting her hug him. She clung tightly, like someone afraid the ground might vanish again. They sat together at a small table. Karen stayed nearby, but out of earshot. Daniel described everything he did before he did it sitting, reaching for a cup, shifting in his chair. He remembered how important predictability was. He remembered how fear grew in silence. How's your daughter? Lena asked. She's good, he said. She'd like you, Lena nodded, satisfied. I think I'd like her too. They talked about simple things, food, music, what buses sounded like when they stopped, what it felt like to walk in sunlight you couldn't see, but could feel on your face. Lena spoke more than she had at the bus stop. Her voice carried less caution now. Before he left, she asked the question he'd been bracing for. Will I have to move again? She asked. Daniel chose his words with care. I don't know yet, he said honestly, but I know you won't be forgotten. She reached for his hand. Promise? He swallowed. I promise I'll try. That evening, he picked up his daughter and cooked dinner while she talked nonstop about her day. At one point, she asked, Dad, why are you so quiet? He looked at her early, looked at her and felt something shift. How would you feel? He asked slowly, if another kid needed help for a while. She thought about it. Like a friend. Like someone who doesn't have anyone right now. His daughter nodded. Then they should come here. It was said so simply, without fear or calculation, that it nearly broke him. Later that night, Daniel filled out paperwork he never expected to touch. Temporary placement forms, background checks, home evaluations. He stared at the final page for a long time before signing. Because sometimes, the truth that stuns you isn't something terrible, sometimes. It's the moment you realize you were meant to stop at that bus stop all along. The house felt different the night Lena arrived. Not louder. Not messier. Just fuller. Daniel had expected chaos questions, adjustments, awkward silences, but what he got instead was a careful kind of quiet. The kind that comes when everyone is trying not to break something fragile. Lena stood in the entryway with her small backpack held tight to her chest, listening. She tilted her head slightly, mapping the space with sound the way others use sight. "This is the living room," Daniel said gently. "Couch on your left. Coffee table in front. No sharp corners." She nodded, committing it to memory. His daughter hovered a few steps away, unsure whether to speak. Daniel could see the questions fighting their way out of her. He caught her eye and gave a small nod. "Hi," she said. "I'm Maya." Lena smiled immediately. "Your voice sounds kind." Maya blinked, surprised, then grinned. "Thanks. You can sit by me if you want." They sat together on the couch, close but not touching, like two people learning the edges of a new world. Maya started talking about school, about her favorite shows, about how their dad burned toast but pretended it was on purpose. Lena laughed softly, the sound cautious but real. Daniel watched from the kitchen doorway, his chest tight again, but this time not from fear. The routine settled faster than he expected. Morning schedules adjusted. Extra care taken with floor space. Shoes lined up against the wall instead of tossed aside. Daniel narrated everything at first where he set a glass. When he entered a room, but eventually, Lena began to anticipate his movements, her confidence growing day by day. At night, though, was harder. The first evening, Lena slept in the spare room. Daniel heard her crying just after midnight. Not loud, just enough to carry. He knocked softly. "Lena, it's me." "It's dark," she said, her voice trembling. "I know," he replied. "But I'm right outside. You'll still be here in the morning?" she asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I always am." That answer seemed to matter more than any light. The crying stopped. Child services visited often at first. Karen asked careful questions, took notes, observed interactions. Daniel answered honestly, even when it made him uncomfortable. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just wanted to do this right. One afternoon, Karen pulled him aside. "You're doing well," she said. "Both of you." "Both?" he asked. She smiled. "Yes, this isn't easy," he agreed. "But it feels necessary." Weeks passed. Then the call came. They found Lena's mother. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't run away. She'd been living 2 cities over, staying with relatives, working nights. When Karen explained the situation, the woman broke down. She admitted everything: fear, pressure, the uncle who had insisted Lena was a burden, the belief that leaving her somewhere public meant someone kinder would find her. Daniel listened to the report in silence, anger and sorrow tangling together in his chest. "She wants to see Lena," Karen said carefully. "Supervised." Daniel didn't answer right away. He thought of Lena's hand searching for his in the dark. Of her question at the bus stop. "Will you disappear?" "What does Lena want?" he asked. "She doesn't know yet," Karen replied. "But she deserves the choice." The meeting happened in a quiet room with soft chairs and no sharp edges. Lena sat beside Daniel, her fingers lightly hooked into his sleeve. When her mother spoke, Lena froze. "Lena," the woman whispered. "It's Mama." Lena didn't move. Minutes passed before she spoke. "You said you'd come back," her mother sobbed. "I was scared." "So was I," Lena said, her voice steady in a way that broke Daniel's heart. The conversation was slow, painful, honest. When it ended, Lena leaned into Daniel without thinking. That night, as Daniel tucked her into bed, she asked quietly, Do I have to leave? He knelt beside her. No one's making you go anywhere right now. She nodded. I want to stay. Daniel rested his forehead against the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the weight of that simple sentence. Because the truth, the one that stunned him most of all, was finally clear. He hadn't just saved a child at a bus stop. He had found someone who needed him as much as he needed her. The decision didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces, quiet moments stitched together by routine and trust. Lena stayed. What was supposed to be temporary stretched into weeks, then months. Child Services extended the placement while the courts reviewed Lena's case. Her mother attended counseling. The uncle disappeared from every conversation. Nothing moved quickly, but nothing moved backward either. Daniel learned new rhythms. He learned how Lena counted steps without realizing it. How she touched the doorframe every time she entered a room, just to be sure it was real. How silence unsettled her more than noise. He adjusted the house, not just to be safer, but to be kinder. Maya adjusted too. At first, she'd treated Lena like a guest, polite, careful, slightly distant. But one evening, Daniel overheard them whispering under the covers long after bedtime. Are you scared? Maya asked. Sometimes, Lena answered. Me too, Maya admitted. But Dad always figures stuff out. Lena was quiet for a moment. I think he does too. That night, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table long after both girls had fallen asleep, staring at 2 half-finished homework sheets, 2 water glasses, 2 backpacks by the door, 2 lives now depending on him. The weight of it pressed down hard, but it wasn't crushing. It was grounding. The court date arrived on a gray morning that smelled like rain. Daniel wore his only suit, slightly tight at the shoulders. Lena wore a simple dress Maya had helped her choose, describing the color and the way the fabric felt. Lena held Daniel's hand the entire time, her grip firm but calm. Her mother was there too. She looked smaller than Daniel remembered, tired, humbled, trying not to break. When Lena spoke, the room stilled. I love my mom, Lena said clearly, but I was scared with her. I'm not scared here. No one interrupted her. No one rushed her. I want my mom to get better, she continued, but I want to stay. The judge listened, asked questions, took notes. When the ruling came, it wasn't dramatic. No speeches. No tears. Just words spoken plainly. Daniel was granted long-term guardianship, with supervised visitation for Lena's mother and the possibility of future reassessment. Outside the courthouse, Lena stood still for a long moment, breathing in the damp air. Is this real? She asked. Yes, Daniel said. It is. She smiled, not wide, not loud, but steady. Life moved forward. School brought new challenges, accommodations, meetings, explanations. Some teachers were patient. Some weren't. Daniel learned how often he'd have to advocate, how many times. He'd have to push gently but firmly to make sure Lena wasn't overlooked. Maya became her guide in the hallways, her defender on the playground, her loudest voice when Lena's was ignored. The girls fought sometimes, of course. Over music, over space, over nothing at all. But they always found their way back to each other. One evening, months later, Daniel drove past the same bus stop. The bench was still there. The shelter still cracked. Traffic still indifferent. He slowed without thinking. Lena, sitting in the back seat, tilted her head. We're near the place, aren't we? Yes, he said. Can we stop? She asked. He parked. They stood together for a moment, listening to the sounds, the buses, the wind, the footsteps of strangers passing without noticing. Lena walked carefully to the bench and sat down, her hands resting in her lap the same way they had that first night. I waited here a long time, she said quietly. Daniel crouched beside her. I know. She turned her face toward him. But you came. Yes, he said again. After a moment, she stood. Okay, I'm done waiting. They walked back to the car. As Daniel drove home to a house filled with voices, routines, empantses, he understood the truth that had once stunned him at a forgotten bus stop. Some children are abandoned. Others are found. And sometimes, without planning it, a single dad becomes exactly who he was needed to be. Life didn't turn perfect after that. It turned real. There were mornings when Daniel burned the toast and ran late for work. Days when Lena came home frustrated because someone at school spoke to her slowly, loudly, like blindness had stolen her intelligence too. Evenings when Maya slammed her bedroom door because sharing a father was harder than she'd expected. But there were also small victories that felt bigger than anything Daniel had known before. The first time Lena navigated the house without touching the walls. The first school concert where Maya stood on stage and Lena sat in the front row, counting every note by sound alone. The first night Lena slept through without asking if he'd still be there in the morning. Daniel learned that love wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was repetitive. It showed up every single day and answered the same questions over and over, until the questions slowly stopped being asked. One evening, months later, Lena came home unusually quiet. She set her backpack down carefully, shoes aligned by the door like always, then walked into the kitchen and stood there. "Dad," she said. He paused. It was the first time she'd ever used that word. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady only by force of will. "At school today," she said, "we had to write about where we feel safe." His chest tightened. "I didn't know what to write at first," she continued, "because I used to think safe was a place, like a room, or a bus stop if someone promised to come back." She reached out until her fingers brushed his sleeve. "But now I think safe is a person." Daniel turned away before either girl could see his eyes. Later that night, after homework was done and dishes were drying in the rack, Maya sat beside him on the couch. "You know," she said casually, "you didn't just help her." He looked at her. "What do you mean?" "You changed her whole life," Maya said. Then, after a beat, and kind of hours too, Daniel nodded slowly. "Are you okay with that?" Maya leaned against him. "Yeah, I think we're better this way." Paperwork eventually finalized. The court dates ended. Lena's mother continued, supervised visits awkward, emotional, careful. Healing didn't erase the past, but it stopped the bleeding. Lena learned she could love her mother without having to wait for her. Years passed. The bus stop faded into memory, but never into nothing. Sometimes Daniel would catch himself slowing near it, just for a second, before continuing on. Not out of sadness, but gratitude. Because that cracked bench had been the place where his life quietly rerouted. On Lena's 13th birthday, she asked for something unexpected. "I want to go back there," she said. As they did. She stood at the bus stop, taller now, steadier. Cars passed. Buses hissed and pulled away. No one noticed them. "People walked past me that day," she said calmly. "They didn't mean to be cruel. They were just busy." Daniel nodded. "I know." She turned toward him. "You weren't." She reached into her pocket and placed something in his hand, a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. "My story," she said. "The one I wrote. About the man who saw me." Daniel unfolded it slowly, hands shaking. At the top, written in careful letters, were the words, "Sometimes the truth that stuns you isn't what was taken from a child. It's what someone chose to give." Daniel swallowed hard. As they walked back to the car, Lena slipped her hand into his, confident, certain. She wasn't waiting anymore. And he wasn't just a man who'd stopped at a bus stop. He was a father, twice over. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. You never know who needs to be seen. Just once, for everything to change.